Okay, let's rock and roll. You turned it off.
Well done, Chair.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a moment of silence, Michael.
Yes, a moment of silence and respect and appreciation for our first responders, for our military and all of our personnel and citizens who are overseas and potentially in harm's way. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. All right, I think people are familiar with the hybrid meeting process. The Zoom public is asked to remain muted. We'll give first opportunity to comment and ask questions to the board, second opportunity to people in the room, and third opportunity to the Zoom public. The meeting is being recorded via Zoom. A recording will be uploaded later to the township's YouTube channel for viewing. Chairman's report, the annual ABC planning session will be on Tuesday, January 31st, and we'll start at 6:30. And we held an executive session before this meeting to discuss legal and real estate matters with our solicitor. I'm going to exercise privilege and take item 6 first before the hearing. And we'll ask the chief to come up and give us the police report.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start with a quick statistical report, and rather than giving numbers, I'm just going to give an overview. There was a 62.7% an increase in calls for service for all 3 townships when comparing December of this year, past year, 2022, to pre-pandemic 2019. Overall, for the entire year, there was a 28.2% increase in calls when comparing the data set from 2022 to 2019. In January, an analysis was done to determine what classifications of calls saw an increase versus a decrease, and that was distributed to the Police Commission. If you are interested in participating in that discussion, we invite you to our Police Commission meeting on January 25th from 4 to 6 p.m. in the training room of the Police Department. If that doesn't work for your schedule, we video record and it will be on our website within 24 to 36 hours after that. With regard to East Goshen, there's really 3 trends that I want to highlight that occurred in December. The first one was a significant amount of thefts. We had 14 thefts. We had 6 rather routine thefts, the trash can thefts, which we talked about. We made 2 arrests on that where people were stealing the tips left for the trash collectors. We had 4 thefts from motor vehicles, including 2 at the park. We had 3 thefts of actual vehicles, all from the Waterview Apartments, with 1 arrest of a juvenile and 1 retail theft. I'd like to point out that within the last 10 days, we had a similar trend of motor vehicle thefts that occurred in West Goshen, right on the border with East Goshen. As a result, there were multiple cars stolen, but all 3 subjects that were involved were arrested. The second trend I want to point out is a significant amount of frauds. The frauds did not have any commonality. They were everything from computer repair scams, grandparent scams, identity theft, people's emails that were hacked, and an individual would ask for individuals to buy gift cards for them. But 20 frauds is rather significant for East Goshen. We continue to try to educate our residents, but where there's a will, there's a way. And lastly, we had a significant amount of domestic disturbances in December, 23 domestics or similar incidents, 1 simple assault investigation, and 1 aggravated assault investigation with an arrest. That's unusual, even for December, where we traditionally do see more of those types of calls for service. On the other crimes, we had 4 child abuse investigations, 1 drug-related investigation, one alcohol-related investigation with a person cited, one missing juvenile who was located, a check washing incident, which only having one of those for the month of December is significant because that is a significant decrease from what we were experiencing in East Goshen. And we had one counterfeit forgery incident in which the home health care aide was arrested because they were the perpetrator. Are there any questions from the board?
No, it seems like
The
you're
busy
arresting a lot of people. Good.
Thanks.
Yeah, if you commit a crime, we will arrest you.
Do notice.
Any other, do you want me to leave it open to, or can the questions, if there's any questions, Michelle, can you bring them to the commission?
Absolutely, yeah.
That way I don't hold you up anymore for your public.
You're not
meeting.
holding us up at all, but yes, thank you very much. And if anybody does have any questions for the chief, direct them to me and I'll get them to her.
And we'll get you an answer right
Yeah.
away.
Michelle is the police commissioner this year.
And please visit our website. There's a lot of information there. Really,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Yeah, Crime Watch is a really great website to go to.
Thank you, chief.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Grant, you want to bat next?
Good evening. The Goshen Fire Company report for December. We had 59 fire calls, 42 fire police responses, and 490 EMS calls. And that, again, was by far the busiest month we've ever had. There were several, I think 3 days, we had 23 calls in one day. So it's just crazy numbers. We had 26 fire calls in East Goshen Township, 13 fire police responses, and 248 EMS calls in East Goshen during the month. For the year, we finished with 602 fire calls, which is slightly ahead of last year. We had a little bit of a bump on December 23rd when the storm front came through. We were very busy there for about 24 hours. For EMS, we finished the year with 4,635 calls, which is about 20% above last year. Large reason for that increase is the power shift that we run during the day. That's picked up a number of calls within our district that normally would have been covered by another agency. For the year, the primary EMS responses were for falls and lift assists. That's by far our largest demand on calls. I think we were 984 falls and lift assists for the year. The next highest category would have been respiratory difficulty, and then cardiac issues and auto accidents were sort of tied for third. So again, the end of the year was very busy. Seems like it's eased up a little bit here in January, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Grant, I was curious, the 26 responses in East Goshen for the fire calls.
Yeah.
Were all of them legit fires that needed attending, or were they?
It
Other
was a mix.
issues?
Automatic alarm rate was down in
Okay.
December into 30%, 35% maybe.
Right.
I don't think there was any serious incidents.
Nothing serious. And then how long does it take for an ambulance approximately? How long does it take for an ambulance to get to the call, go to a facility to drop that person for care, and then get back into service? I think we talked about it before. I feel like I remember like 45 minutes to an hour or so. Is that right?
Best case, if we transport somebody,
Yeah.
best case is an hour,
Hour.
hour and 10 minutes. And obviously we're out the door immediately, travel
course.
time to the scene, 15, 20 minutes to assess and load them, travel time to the hospital. But as we know, we could be able to leave the patient and return to service. Sometimes we're there for 2 hours waiting for a bed.
Sure.
Just depends.
And has the power shift been helping?
Absolutely.
So this is from, is it 8 to 4?
8 to 4. Yeah, we run an 8-hour power shift.
So right now we have 2 ambulances that run 24/7.
Mhm.
And then there's what they call the power shift that runs from 8 to 4
So it's three.
to pick up some of the slack that they were just getting inundated, and we were going to another provider for services. So this is really helping keeping our East Goshen, our East Goshen residents safe for having that extra shift. Thank you.
Well,
Grant, I just have one quick question. How is the EMS subscription drive going this year compared to previous years?
we've gotten, well, it's been out in the mail for a couple months now. I think the response I'm hearing sort of anecdotally is it's at least as good as last year.
Okay.
So
Was last year good?
last year set a record.
All right, perfect. Thanks.
You know, and we bumped it up a couple dollars, but that doesn't seem to have had too much of an impact.
Grant, just a couple questions, and
Mike.
a couple comments. First of all, the preparation of the year-end report, both Goshen Fire Company as well as Good Fellowship and Malvern, really well done. So very informative, well prepared. On responses, incident type that you list them, for instance, system or detection malfunction, which were a significant number
Mhm.
of the 602, and unintentional system detector operations without fire, no fire, 161 of the 602. Do these incidents typically involve personnel and equipment dispatch?
They all are.
They all are, they all involve this,
Yeah,
and
that's-
so with each of those calls, there's the risk involved with the personnel and the equipment, as well as getting to scene to something that's not an active situation
Yes.
and disruptive to, okay.
Yeah, so it's very rare. I say they're rare. We had one the other evening at the Bible Baptist Church where a bathroom fan caught fire and triggered the automatic alarm. We got it as an automatic alarm. We responded as we always do. And it turned out to be
An actual something,
an actual
Yeah.
something. It wasn't, you know, a lot of damage, but it was a real situation. But all those numbers you're reading are, you know, cooking vapors or it just went off. You know, we've got a guy in West Town that likes to do carpentry in his garage and doesn't
That's an
cover up the
awful
smoke detector. So
but there's a response every time.
yes, every single time.
The interesting, one of the interesting stats I thought that I would mention under your report, your end report for patients treated 65 and older. East Goshen Township, there were a total of 1,789 patients treated. Of that number, 1,487 or 83% were 65 and older. And if you look at a couple of the other municipalities, West Goshen had a significant number, but the percentage 65 and older was 66%. Westtown was 51%. Willistown was a bit higher at 76%, but here we are at 83%. And it does speak to some of the demographic in the township as to, I think I've heard a figure that maybe 40% of our population or households are in a retirement mode, either one or both.
Yeah. I've
So
heard that.
it does speak to that. And when you look at the number of the type of incident, particularly either respiratory or fall and lift assist, they represent, those two categories represent over 30% of all the total incidents as they're broken down. And that typically involves a more senior population with both of those circumstances going on. So
Yeah,
it does reflect upon the demographic that we have in the township that is correlated with the type of responses that we need and of course the number. So, thanks. I really appreciate the report. So they're informative and they'll be available online.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grant.
Thanks, everybody.
I will take care of it.
You got them?
Yep.
Okay, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will take care of the Malvern Fire Company and Good Fellowship report. Very quickly, East Goshen Township for the month of December, monthly response from Malvern Fire Company was 47 responses. That year-to-date number is 416, and that constituted 19.5% of Malvern Fire Company's total calls. For the entire year of 2022, East Goshen Township had a total of 426 responses, which constituted 19.7% of Malvern Fire Company's total calls. And I will also read quickly some numbers from Good Fellowship. For the month of December, East Goshen Good Fellowship, the monthly responses were 88, which was 12.4% of Good Fellowship's calls. And that was a year to date at that time at 661 calls. And for the entire year of 2022, East Goshen had 661 calls, which was a total of 8.96% of Good Fellowship's call volume. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we know anything about Carmen? He's listed here.
I talked to him today.
Yeah.
He is feeling better. He's finally walking and just looking to try to get the boot off, as he said, at some point soon, as he phrased it. So he's improving, just not there yet.
Good, thank you.
Carmen is Carmen Batavio, our fire inspector, longtime member of the Goshen Fire Company and former supervisor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long resume in East Goshen. Good man.
We'll move to number 5 then, the public hearings. And we'll ask Bill Chrisman to take care of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I'm Bill Chrisman, Township Solicitor. Tonight, we have a conditional use hearing for the application of Grove Meadow Developers LLC for conditional use in order to develop the property located at 1010 Hershey Mills Road with 15 single-family residential lots under the township's single-family open space development ordinance. This property is located in the R2 low-density residential zoning district. And before I turn it over to the applicant to present their case this evening, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping matters. First, what's going to happen tonight is this: we're going to hold a hearing, and it's a hearing. This is a little bit different from your normal Board of Supervisors proceeding, where in this situation, the board will basically be sitting as the judge, and they will be listening to the applicant's case and any other parties who may wish to present evidence. And at the end, maybe not tonight, but at some point they will render a decision on the application. Once I'm done with my housekeeping matters, we'll turn it over to the applicant to present their case through witnesses and evidence. And then the township will have the opportunity to present a case as well. I don't foresee that occurring, but they have the opportunity to do so. Then other parties could have the opportunity to present evidence on the application as well, and followed by public comment and then the closing of the hearing. You will note that we have a court reporter here this evening who is stenographically recording everything that is said. She's probably got the hardest job in this room tonight. So if you do plan to speak this evening, please make sure that you identify yourself first and last name, that you speak slowly, that you speak clearly, and most importantly, that we don't talk over each other, because she cannot type two things at once. So allow someone else to finish speaking before you start speaking yourself. At this point, before I go into other parties to the hearing, I'd like the applicant's attorney to introduce herself.
Good evening, Allison Zaro of Riley Riper, Holland and College Greco on behalf of the applicant. Is it working? Can you hear
Yes.
me
Yeah.
better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's better.
Do you need me to, anybody need me to repeat in the audience?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
And Allison, I don't know if you'd prefer it when you're asking questions of your witness, if you'd prefer the witness to stand up here with the microphone or stay seated, and because if you stay seated, you have to shift the microphone back and forth, and whatever's easiest for you.
That's a good point. It may make sense to do that, just so we're
Yeah.
not shifting back and forth.
Okay, very good. So before I admit some board exhibits into the record, I would like to see if there's anyone in the audience here that would like to become a party to this proceeding. And I'll explain what that means. If you have some interest in this application above that of the general public, generally it means you'll be impacted, or your property will be impacted in some way more than, everyone else in the world. You can ask for what's called party status. And it has a couple important distinctions if you are a party to this proceeding. First, you'll get to ask questions of witnesses. Second, you'll be able to present your own testimony at a certain point in the hearing. And third, it gives you the ability to appeal any decision of this body if you are aggrieved by that decision. You don't need to be a party if you want to just provide public comment at the end. But remember, public comment is not evidence, so the board cannot take that into account when they render their decision. So with that being said, is there anyone in the audience, but if you could raise your hand if you would like to seek party status? Okay, we've got a couple here. I'm going to start from the front. If you could come up here to the podium one by one, I have a couple questions for you. So you in the black jacket, yep, come on up, please. And what we'll do is I'll ask you a little bit of information. I'll ask the applicant's attorney if they object to you becoming a party, and then we'll discuss amongst the board whether we grant the application or not. So can you state your name and address, please?
Hi, I am Natalie McManus. I live at 1331 Jackson Lane.
Can you spell your last name, please?
MC, capital MANUS.
Okay. And what was your address and one more time?
1331 Jackson Lane.
Do you know how far away you are from the subject property?
I am in the cul-de-sac that the properties back up to.
Okay. Did you get a notice of tonight's hearing or the initial hearing?
I was
Beautiful.
at the last meeting when this proceeding was deferred till tonight.
Okay. Ms. Zar, do you have an objection to her becoming party?
No objection.
Okay. And with that, I'd suggest to the board that we grant party status to Ms. McManus.
Yes.
And how do we do that?
Just nod.
Yeah.
We can do that, Bill.
Perfect. So you will be a party. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Your name, please.
Allison with one L, OSHOP, OSHOP, 1334 Jackson Lane.
Okay, same situation as the previous party that you're.
It's right behind me. Mhm.
Okay. Ms. Zaro,
I have no objection.
board, I'm seeing nodding. All right, you're a party. Thank you. Next. Hi there.
Lillian Fedor, F as in Frank, EDOR, 1013 Hershey Mill Road, across the street from Miller's,
What was that address one more time?
1013 Hershey Mill.
Ms. Zaro,
No objection.
board. All right, you're a party. Thank you. And sir,
Good evening. My name is Ron McGill. I am another historic property owner at 1050 Hershey Mill Road, just down the street from this property in question.
No objection.
and board. And is your last name MC capital GILL?
Correct.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
Is this property adjacent to the properties that touch the property?
It is not touching.
So
Yeah.
can you explain why you want to be a party?
I have a speech prepared for you all to listen to about the preservation of historic properties and the preservation of 1 acre zoning after, or 1 acre lot size after the roads and after the improvements and detention basins would be required, but I'll go into that in my public statement later. But we successfully convinced the board a few years ago to make the right decision on the Lewis property, and a proper buyer was found to preserve that property. Part of my speech goes into the fact that all of us bought these properties on Hershey Mill Road to preserve them. And while I would never be against somebody making some money doing a subdivision, I would ask the board to go by the rules. R2 zoning and that piece of ground, you could get 5 or 6 lots up there, but not 15.
Okay, and I think you'll have the opportunity
Yeah.
to give that information
So,
at a
but
later time.
that's my interest.
Thank you.
Should he be a a party or not?
The applicant did not object, and it's on the same road and not that far away from the subject property, so I think it's appropriate. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to be a party? Anyone on Zoom? Nope. All right, then with that, before I turn it over to Ms. Zaro for her case, I'm going to admit a few exhibits into the record. These are board exhibits. And they are as follows. Exhibit B1 is the East Goshen Township zoning ordinance and map. Exhibit B2 is the conditional use application being considered by the Board of Supervisors this evening. Exhibit B3 is an email from the applicant's counsel granting extension of MPC deadlines for holding the first hearing. And before I go to the next exhibit, I will mention that this is a reopened hearing. We did hold one previous evening. That was November 15th, 2022. It was continued on the record to this evening. Exhibit B4 is the form of public notice for that initial hearing. Exhibit B5 is the proof of publication of that public notice. Exhibit B6 is a Pannoni review letter dated September 21st, 2022. Exhibit B7 is the revised sketch plan submitted by the applicant dated October 5th, 2022. Exhibit B8 is the applicant's response letter to Pannoni's review letter dated October 5th, 2022. Exhibit B9 is the historic resource impact study submitted by the applicant dated October of 2022. Exhibit B10 is Pannoni's revised review letter dated October 27th, 2022. Only three more. Exhibit B11 is a pipeline awareness study dated November 11th, 2022, submitted by the applicant. Exhibit B12 is a zoning officer's memorandum dated November 7th, 2022. And exhibit B13 is an updated pipeline awareness study submitted by the applicant dated January 10th, 2023. Before I turn this over to Ms. Zaro to put on her case through testimony, do any members of the board have questions about the procedures for this evening or how this is going to go? Okay, hearing none, Ms. Zaro, it's your floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chrisman. Good evening, everyone. Before I get started, I do have a pre-marked packet of exhibits to hand up to you so that you have paper in front of you, not just the.
I have the
electronic
electronic ones as well, so.
And when you speak, can you speak a little bit? Can you bring the microphone closer
Yes.
to you, please?
I will.
That way everybody can hear you on Zoom. Thank you.
I'm okay.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you. It's good.
So as I said, I represent the applicant Grove Meadow Developers LLC, and we are here this evening about a property that's approximately 16 acres located at 1010 Hershey Mill Road in the township. This property is zoned R2 district, and the R2 district does allow by conditional use and open space single-family development option. You'll hear this evening testimony from two witnesses that will touch on what we're proposing to do here and walk you through the standards for conditional use approval. Conditional use is a permitted use by zoning, provided that we meet certain requirements, which I just said we will address. The proposed subdivision and this property do contain 2 historic resources that are currently listed as class 2 on your historic resource inventory. Both of those particular structures would be saved and placed on their own lots. And then there would be 13 additional single-family detached dwelling lots for a total of 15 lots on the property. I have 2 witnesses this evening. The first is T.R. Moser, who is the representative of the applicant, and the second is our civil engineer for the project, Michael Hartman. But before I have T.R. sworn, I did just want to note 2 of the exhibits that I have marked, and then the rest we'll walk through as part of the testimony. Exhibit A1 is the conditional use application and checklist with cover letter from Michael Hartman dated August 23rd, 2022, and an open space development layout sketch plan that was submitted with the application initially prepared by DH Enterprises dated August 22nd, 2022. And Exhibit A2 is the East Goshen Township zoning ordinance incorporated by reference. Obviously, the whole thing is not in your hard copy packets. Exhibit A3 is the first exhibit that I will start with TR, and if he could be sworn. And like you suggested, I think it probably does make sense to have him stand at that microphone so that everybody can hear us without trading back and forth.
Thanks, Kara.
TR, could you state your name and business address for the record, please?
It's Theodore R. Moser, and my office is at 1171 Lancaster Avenue, Berwyn, PA.
And what's your position with Grove Meadow Developers LLC?
I am the sole member.
And have you been authorized to appear and make representations, obviously, on behalf, since you are the sole member?
Yes,
And we have marked exhibit as Exhibit A3, a copy of a redacted agreement of sale for the property dated March 15th, 2022, between the current owners, Mark S. Miller and Christine Miller as the sellers, and your entity as the buyer. And to your knowledge, and does this evidence that you are the equitable owner of this property?
it is.
And is Grove Meadow Developers affiliated with Moser Construction Management LLC?
Moser, or I guess Grove Meadows is a development company, and Moser Construction Management is a building company.
And could you tell the board a little bit about Moser Construction Management and your familiarity with this area and, why
So,
you're looking
yeah,
at this
so
site?
I guess the company was started back in 2009 by myself. We've been doing work for homeowners and developers over the last, I guess, 12, 13 years. Prior to that, I worked at the McKee Group for 2 years, and then I worked for my father at Moser Builders. And currently we're doing a development not too far from here in Willistown off of Forest Lane, Troutbeck Farm.
For this particular site, did you retain DH Enterprises to prepare Exhibit A4, which is an open space development sketch plan dated October 5th, 2022?
Yes, we did.
And is the Exhibit A4 plan the plan for which you're seeking conditional use approval tonight?
Yes, it is.
And referring to Exhibit A4, and I'll give Derek a moment. I know we have a lot of exhibits. Pull that up, just if you could identify generally where the property is and what you're proposing to do, understanding that we will have Michael Hartman provide technical testimony about what's shown on this plan.
The property is approximately 16 acres and is improved with an existing farmhouse and barn, which are designated as Class 2 historic resources on the East Goshen Historic Resource Inventory. And those current properties do not front Hershey Mills Lane.
And are you then also proposing to construct an additional 13 homes as shown on this plan?
Yes, we seek to develop the property under the single-family open space development option of the East Goshen zoning ordinance, which is permitted by the conditional use in the R2 zoning district, which is where the property is located.
And with respect to the historic resources, you touched on the fact, and they're shown in a flag lot configuration on Exhibit A4, you touched on the fact that They would each be on their own lot. And would it be the intention, even though one is technically a barn today, would the idea be that that would be offered for sale and to allow someone to come in and convert that specifically to a single family dwelling to preserve it?
Yes.
And did you engage Mary Sue Boyle and Company to prepare a historic resource impact study, which we have marked as Exhibit A5, in accordance with township ordinance requirements?
Yes.
And based on that study, do you believe that the proposed development would have an adverse impact on those historic resources?
No.
And did you also appear before the Planning Commission on November 2nd, 2022? And did they recommend approval of this application?
Yes, they did.
And I do have a lot of testimony for Mr. Hartman. So to the extent that you have specific questions about the plan, he would be answering those. I just wanted to preface that, but I have no further questions for Mr. Moser at this time.
Okay, are there any questions from the board for Mr. Moser just on what he has testified to so far?
No.
Not seeing any. How about from any of the parties? Do you have any questions for Mr. Moser related only to what he has testified to so far this evening? All right, yes, sir. I saw your hand first. Mr. McGill, if you could come on up, you'll need to speak into the microphone. My apologies. Stay handy.
My question related to where we've already gone with this is just simply exactly what impact do you think you're gonna have on other historic properties nearby and on the atmosphere of Hershey Mill Road and its history,
Okay,
right?
Mr. Moser.
I can't answer that question right this second. I would defer to my historic resource study and the specialists behind that.
And what we can do, we do have our historic resource impact study prepare with us this evening. So I certainly can provide testimony from her if the board would like to hear specifics on that and have her answer that question.
Okay, yeah, we'll see what Mr. Hartman is able to testify to, and if there are further questions,
Okay.
maybe we'll ask you to do that.
Okay.
And I saw another question. Yes, ma'am. It was Ms. Fedor? Got it. If you could come up to the microphone and speak.
The last meeting that we talked about this project, I asked Mr. Moser about the two houses that are there now and the driveway that serves them. And he wasn't sure whether the houses were going to be part of the development or sold separately. The
Okay.
driveway
Now
is
would be a
right
time.
across from me.
Okay, now would be a time to ask a question to Mr. Moser, not necessarily comments.
Do you know if you're keeping that driveway? I thought you were going to do away with the driveway and the bridge, which impacts my house.
And Mr. Moser, if you could come up and sort of indicate or explain using your words what it is that we're talking about. You mind switching places with him real quick? Okay, thank you.
The question has to do with this driveway right here.
Okay, and if you could use your words, because the transcript can't show what right here is.
Okay, so there's an existing driveway that leads to the property. It's at 1010 Hershey Mill Road. And it is our intention to remove that driveway. However, we need to get the approval from the township engineer and the conservation district in order to do so. So, my intent is to remove it and my engineer, Michael Hartman, can go in more in depth of what our plan to restore that whole riparian buffer is. But yes, it is my intention to remove that.
Thank you. Any other questions from parties? Oh, yep. And it was Ms. McManus.
Not sure if this is the time to ask or not, so I'll come back if it's not the right
We'll
time.
let you know
but
if it's not.
Thanks. Are you still intending to have the easement for the potential walkway in the future? And the properties that back up to Jackson Lane?
Okay, Again, can you sort of explain what it is that she's asking about using your words and then answer the question?
There is a comment on one of the Panoni review sheets talking about a trail system, combining the trails in East Goshen Township. There was one point a proposed trail discussed from our property to the Goshen Downs community. Right here.
And again, just for the record,
the,
that is to the
Western parcel of the property.
Okay,
At this time, our intention is only to give the township a sewer easement at that location.
And I will say that Mr. Hartman will provide additional testimony regarding this in his testimony.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, if you could come up here again, and it was Ms. Oshop. That's all right, it still needs to be on the record.
So if I feel like my question is more for Mr. Hartman, but it turns out it's really for Mr. Moser, does he get the opportunity to come back up again, or?
Would
How
you be
does that
willing
work?
to bring him back?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, I'll just ask now, but I.
No,
it's
I mean,
more
I was gonna
detailed
say, I
question,
think
guess.
some of the details we're gonna get into with Mr. Hartman, but to the
But I don't want to
extent-
miss my opportunity to.
Understood, yeah, and I would say they'll both have been sworn at that point, so if it's something that's more appropriate for Mr. Moser to answer, that's fine, we can have him answer that
Okay.
at that time, yeah.
So my question is, what sort of, is there anything planned as a division between this proposed development and Goshen Downs besides the shrubs or the bushes that you have there? At one point, there was talk of a fence with a break in the fence. Is there any sort of division there, or is it just that the land will kind of all run together?
So to answer that question, that hasn't been determined yet because we're not at that part of the planning stage. So we'll be coming back here for hopefully, if we get through this preliminary final approval and work with the township on what gets done there from the recommendation from the township officials. So I believe there's an existing fence there right now. Our goal is to preserve the exterior of this property and keep it as existing and improve it. So I understand your concern. I don't know how to answer it at this second.
All right.
Bill, I have a question, and it may not be timely here, but I want to ask it anyway. There are some members of the board who liked the easement. When do we address that?
I think, are you going to have some engineering testimony to
Ye-
discuss that?
Yes, the engineering testimony will discuss it, and then we're happy to field additional questions and comments from the board. I realize that is a topic that everyone would like to discuss.
We'll spend some time on it.
Yes. The other thing I would note, just from a sort of a procedural standpoint, since TR touched on it, I know we have residents here, just so that they know that this is a assuming that this goes forward and the board were to approve the conditional use, Mr. Moser was referencing land development, which is another step in the process where there's more detailed engineering that occurs at that time. And that is also a public meeting process where we would appear before the planning commission and the board of supervisors, again, with additional review letters from the township consultants. So I just wanted to explain that on the record, knowing we have folks here that aren't used to this process and they may not know what he was specifically referring to.
Thank you.
Um,
Okay, then with that, any other questions for Mr. Moser? Does not appear as though there are. So I think you can call your next witness.
Next, I'd like to call Michael Hartman.
I do.
Michael, can you state your name and business address for the record, please?
Okay, my name is Michael Hartman. My business is DH Enterprises. My address is 2815 Penn Avenue, West Lawn, PA.
And who is your employer and what is your position with that employer?
I'm actually self-employed, have been for about 12, 13 years.
And is your company DH Enterprises?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And are you a registered professional civil engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
And have you testified previously in front of municipal bodies such as this one regarding subdivision plans and zoning?
Yes, I have.
And we have marked as Exhibit A6, Michael Hartman's CV, and I'd like to qualify him as an expert in civil engineering.
Okay, so just to explain to the board what that means, if you haven't done one of these. In order to be qualified as an expert in something, you need to show that you have unique qualifications to back that up, basically. I will represent to this board, Mr. Hartman. I'm familiar with Mr. Hartman. I have in other proceedings seen him qualified as an expert in civil engineering. Do you have any questions on his resume to determine whether he should be qualified as a civil engineer? Just qualifications only. Do any of the parties have questions regarding Mr. Hartman's qualifications to be recognized as an expert? Then with that, I'd recommend to the board that you so qualify him.
So qualified.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Michael, are you responsible from an engineering perspective for this project and the preparation of the plans that are associated with this proposal?
Yes, I am.
And are you familiar with the subject property and its features, as well as the surrounding area?
Yes, I am.
And are you also familiar with the applicable regulations of the East Goshen Township zoning ordinance? So we touched on it already, but were you responsible for the plan that we have marked as Exhibit A1 dated August 22nd, 2022?
Yes, I was.
And then marked as Exhibit A4, we have a revised version of the plan that TR testified to, the approval is being sought for, marked as Exhibit A4 dated October 5th, 2022. And were you also responsible for the preparation of that plan?
Yes, I was.
And in terms of revisions, were revisions made based on Planning Commission and Township Consultants Review to end up with the Exhibit A4 plan that we are looking at this evening?
Yes.
Referring to Exhibit A4, we'll start at the beginning. Can you please identify where the property is located and existing features on the property today?
All right, the property is located along Hershey Mill Road, directly across from the intersection of Hershey Mill and Tanglewood Drive. Currently, there's the existing historic home and barn in the property. Along the frontage of the site, there's also the stream that we'll be looking to cross. Surrounding the property are single-family home developments. Directly to the north, south, and east is a single-family home, and then the East Goshen Down development to the west.
And referring to the same plan, Exhibit A4, can you please give an overview of what's proposed as part of this development? Pointing out, as Bill said, using your words to describe where things are on the plan.
Even brought my laser pointer.
Yeah.
So, the proposal is to access Hershey Mill Road directly across the street from Tanglewood Drive, and then enter into the site, and then provide kind of in a large cul-de-sac arrangement with the homes fronting around it, and then a central green. We have the two historic structures then would be incorporated into our roadway system. And as we touched upon, the existing driveway from the home would be removed pending permitting through DEP and Conservation District. Is that better? Sorry, I'm dealing with this third thing right now, so.
And we touched on this already, but the property is located in the R2 district. And did you review the single-family open space development requirements of the R2 district?
Yes, I did.
And in your opinion, does the applicant's proposal meet the standards and criteria which are found in section 240-36 of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
And I'd like to walk you through some of those. The first one we touched on briefly, is the property a minimum of 8 acres?
Yes, it is.
And specifically, is it approximately 16 acres?
It's approximately 16 acres, and once removing the existing right-of-way for Hershey Mill Road is 15.8.
And will each of these lots that are proposed be served by public sewer and water?
Yes, they will.
And have you contacted the East Goshen Municipal Authority and confirmed that capacity is available to the site?
Yes, we have.
And we have marked as Exhibit A7, a will serve letter from the authority dated July 13th, 2022. Generally speaking, where would you intend, if you have a contemplated connection point today, if you could just point that out for the board?
Sure, it's not exactly on the plan, but the manhole that we would connect to is in Tanglewood Drive.
And similarly, you touched on the fact that there would be public water. Is Aqua PA the water provider here?
Yes, they are.
And have you made initial contact with Aqua to confirm that there would be water available to serve the site?
Yes.
And again, if you have an idea of where that water connection would be made, if you could explain that to the board?
Again, that would be also in Tanglewood, a little bit farther in off of Hershey Mill Road, on the north side of the road.
Now, we touched on trail we'll talk about later, but there was a reference to a question about sewer easement, and TR referenced that as well. Does this plan show, and would the development proposal include an offer of a 20-foot wide sanitary sewer easement on this property between the property and the neighboring subdivision to the west?
It would. The plan doesn't currently show the location of the easement, but it would be kind of in this open space between lot 6 and 7. Up here where we can get up to right behind the existing basin on East Goshen or Goshen Down.
And is at least 55% of the original tract set aside for open space?
Yes, roughly 58% of qualifying open space.
And would there be no more than one single family detached dwelling for each acre of the tract?
Yes.
And is each single family dwelling separated from any other single family dwelling by at least 30 feet?
Yes, it is.
And are all buildings located from more than 1 foot from the lot lines that are proposed on here?
Yes.
And in terms of other design details, setbacks, et cetera, does the proposal meet those requirements?
Yes, it does.
Would each dwelling and lot provide a minimum of 3 off-street parking spaces?
Yes. We have 2 spaces either in the driveway or in the garage, and then 1 extra space sitting in the front currently to show compliance.
And I'd like to touch on a little bit more about the open space. How would the applicant intend to preserve the open space that's shown on this plan?
Be preserved in a conservation easement with the homeowners association maintaining it.
And there, as part of your design of where this open space is located, did you take into consideration the stream on the property, what would be considered water courses, wetlands, slopes, et cetera, when locating this, and also establishing a place that would be suitable for recreation if that's desired by the board?
Yeah, most of the natural resources are located around the perimeter of the site, so that's why we kept it towards the center.
And so specifically in the center, there would be a flat area that would be suitable for active rec, such as throwing a ball around, something like that, if that's, something that would be desired.
Yeah, relatively flat. It wouldn't be a soccer field flat, but something that, people could use as a active space.
And then there are some other open space design options that are touched on in Pannoni's review letter, which the most recent one is B10, dated October 22nd, 2022. And have you seen and reviewed this review letter specifically?
Yes, I have.
And comment 6 in that letter specifically addresses open space and design criteria. So the first one references the fact that the open space is not permitted to be further sold, subdivided, et cetera. Would that be captured in plan notes and then also addressed in HOA documents?
Yes, currently this plan, note number 1 describes that, note verbatim.
And then, for instance, have you designated areas that would include landscaping locations. And if you could point them out on the plan and explain just generally what's proposed for that.
Okay. Currently, we have landscaping shown around the perimeter of the site and then street trees along there. And then as we move through the land development phase, it'll be brought up to actual township standards and work with township staff on proper plantings.
And there's a suggestion that use of species of vegetation that are native is encouraged. And is that something that the applicant would look at during land development?
Yes.
And then are other open space areas, either natural areas, lawn areas, et cetera?
Yes.
And then finally, the ordinance contemplates there being a site visit. Was there actually a site visit that you went on that was completed?
Yes, we had a site visit, as noted, October 18th.
So next I'd like to touch on the historic resources on the site. You had mentioned that the proposal does involve 2 historic resources that would each be on their own lot. And you've heard some questions about access already. And with respect to the configuration as currently contemplated, would the existing driveway be eliminated subject to third-party approvals and then access be provided to the main road in the subdivision?
Yes, the main driveway would be removed. The 2 houses would come in and connect to our road. And then we would look to restore the floodplain where the driveway and existing bridge are now.
And with respect to creating that new access point to the proposed road, have you identified that the applicant would require a modification of lot requirements, which is permitted for the use of historic resources pursuant to section 240-23B2B2C of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
And if you could explain why you are proposing that and, why that sort of further fosters the retention of these resources as part of this plan.
Because of the location of the 2 structures now kind of sits a little bit off of where our main road would be, we're looking to bring them together on one central driveway and have one, 2 flag lots instead of one, each one having their own separate flag. It's just the way the configuration was, that it makes it, work this way. And then, like I said, if we can do it this way, then we can remove the existing driveway from the floodplain crossing and restore that area.
And would these 2 lots otherwise comply with all of the area and bulk criteria that's applicable to the open space
Yes.
design option? And in your opinion, would the proposed modification and the reuse of these resources be compatible with the surrounding area?
Yes.
Next, I'd like to touch on the trail. So there were some questions already about a trail and whether a trail is desired to the neighboring development to the west. And if you could just give a little more information and color on that, and then, what is currently proposed now.
All right, in the early stages of meeting township staff and discussing some likes and dislikes, we had originally identified a walking trail that would connect from Hershey Mills Road through our roadway system and then continue out to the west into Goshen Down through a path that we weren't quite sure on whether or not it's a basin or some other path. We did get quite a bit of feedback on the negative side, and so we're not at this point proposing it on our plan.
And is that something that was also then addressed at the planning commission meeting, and you proceeded based on their recommendations at that meeting as well?
Yes.
Generally speaking, I'm going to touch on a few more of the comments in the Pannoni review letter, but then other than what we may call out, is the rest of the review letter something that the applicant is able to comply with to the extent that it isn't already noted as a resolved comment?
In this phase or in the land development phase.
So there are some comments that are on the last page of the review letter that I'd like to walk Michael through. We just touched on comment 23. or excuse me, we touched on comment 16, but comment 23 is talking about a different sidewalk and trail easement, and whether it should be provided along the frontage of Hershey's Mill Road for future connections. Did you also discuss that with the Planning Commission?
We did, and they weren't favorable to it. It's just too close to the road and the floodplain, and everything through there. So it'd be very difficult to try and get something like that installed.
And at this point, there would be nothing to connect to in particular along that road either. Is that correct?
Yes.
Comment 24 talks about, it speaks to site layout and grading should be sensitive of existing fencing, vegetation, and hedgerows that provide screening for adjacent properties. And the landscape plan should address gaps in these areas. Is that something that you would intend to further analyze, particularly now that you've received formal survey back, and then address further with detailed landscaping plans during the land development process?
Yes, and that was something that was touched on at the site meeting. There's an existing split rail fence along the property line. There's existing hedgerows, some invasives and stuff like that. So as we move through into the land development phase, we would identify some of the trees that would be removed, additional plantings that be put into place, and then what the final stand of that split rail fence would be.
And comment 25 talks about that the applicant would design building and impervious areas they're identified as maximum for each new lot, and that stormwater would be designed to accommodate maximum building and impervious coverages for each of the new houses on the new lots. Is that something that the applicant is proposing?
Yes, as currently shown, if you look behind the units, there's kind of a stipple hatch pattern area. We want to make sure that there's enough room for any future patios, pools, or anything like that, and that they don't have to modify or put individual infiltration beds on their site as they move forward. Something to help out when, through the zoning office as this, would be moving into the future.
Comment 26 actually goes to a question that was asked earlier about proposed fencing, and fencing specifically along the western property line. And have you taken a look at that at this point to determine what's there today and what the applicant might do during land development?
Yeah, and as I noted, there's some sections of split rail fencing through there. So we would be working with staff to try and figure out what we want to do along that property line in particular.
And then finally, comment 27 notes that the fire marshal would need to review this, and that's something that the applicant would address and, deal with also during land development. Is that correct? So finally, I'd like to turn to the general conditional use standards in the zoning ordinance, which are set forth in section 240-31 of the zoning ordinance. Have you reviewed those conditional use standards?
Yes, I have.
And does one of those standards and other requirements in the subdivision and land development ordinance also require you to take into account whether there are any pipelines in the proximity of the site?
Yes.
And could you explain whether there is a pipeline in the proximity of the site, and also what you did to address that particular requirement?
Okay. As part of the packet, I'd submitted a pipeline awareness study. Actually submitted a second one. The second one just was to note the diameters of the pipes that are running near us, and then also to sign and seal it. But initially, there's 3 pipelines running through the Goshen's Down development, roughly about 500 feet away from our proposed disturbance. 2 of them are 20-inch petroleum, and one of them is a 16-inch petroleum. So we're well away from it. None of our utility connections are there. Our access is not near it. So we're not proposing any disturbance or any impact on that line.
And that pipeline awareness study as revised January 10th, 2023, we have marked as Exhibit A8.
Yes.
In terms of the general conditional use standards, in your opinion, does the proposed development comply with those standards?
Yes.
And specifically, we had touched on it previously, but does the development meet or will it meet when you further design all of the buffering requirements of the zoning ordinance?
Yes.
In your opinion, is the proposed development suitable in terms of logical, efficient, economical extension of public services such as water, sewage, police and fire.
Yes.
And in terms of traffic, have you considered traffic as it relates to the development? I know that it's a smaller subdivision, but in terms of access points and impact.
Yes, that's why we have our access point directly across from Tanglewood to have it at an existing intersection today.
And in your opinion, did you take into account when you were doing this an effort to minimize adverse impacts on historic resources as well as minimize disruption to natural topography, waterways, et cetera, that are on the site?
Yes.
I have no further questions for Mr. Hartman.
Okay, do any members of the board have questions for this witness? Mr. Lynch?
Michael, thanks. I want to go right to the historic resource impact assessment of the farmland. And ask your comment or how you interpret a couple of the statements in the final assessment. First one is the farmhouse and barn will remain intact with no anticipated architectural changes to either structure.
It's TR's intent to sell them as is, and then the future owners, they would be the ones responsible for any permitting that they would need to move forward with any modifications.
Just to clarify that, the barn is currently a barn, right?
Yes,
Okay, and it'd be Mr. Moser's intention to sell it as a barn?
as the structure as is, yes.
And then, but then also understanding that the idea would be that if somebody wanted to, they could seek an additional approval to convert it to a single family dwelling specifically.
Okay.
We acknowledging that we don't have specific plans for it, just to clarify, the idea is he would like to sell it as is to someone that has the interest in the historic resources specifically that,
Yeah.
you know, is interested in doing that kind of thing. So we wouldn't want to be disingenuous by saying someone may not come back in the future, but they would have to do a new impact assessment and seek any appropriate approvals if they wanted to do, you know, exterior changes to those buildings essentially.
And that would include the developer as well. Say that the barn was on the market for an extended period of time, that the developer may retain ownership and decide to invest in it.
Correct, exactly. It could be either, but right now it's just a question of figuring out what that'll be exactly.
And my perception is that while it will remain intact as in this final page of the review, the historic resource assessment, it doesn't mean that they are ultimately either structure are going to look exactly as they look right now.
Correct, but that would require another level of approval.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Thank you. Michael, you commented on the planning commission and said that you had addressed per their recommendation. But I want to call your attention to this is dated 11/7/22 to the Board of Supervisors from Dwayne Brady, Township Zoning Officer, reporting to the board that the township staff, the engineer, and the planning commission reviewed the conditional use application, and that the planning commission moved to recommend approval of the 1010 Hershey's Mill Road, Miller property, the open space sketch plan conditional use application with the following conditions. And condition 4 indicates that the applicant is to provide a trail easement on lots 6 and 7 for future connection to township property to Goshen Downs development. Now, you said you complied with that recommendation, but you've indicated you've taken the easement out of consideration at the moment.
I misspoke then. The easement, yeah, it'd be utility and trail access, but our intention, I meant, was that we're not looking to build a trail through.
Not a trail per se, but
Right.
but an
The
easement
wording of the easement
might be
would
granted if the board so made that a condition. consistent with the recommendation of the planning commission.
Yes.
Okay.
Trail out of it.
Yeah, the trail per se is a manifest, but the legal element of it being an existing easement for future or for pedestrian access, but not necessarily garnered
Right.
or garnished with an actual trail structure.
Right.
And just to be clear, that was the applicant's not objecting to future access in that area, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification, Bill. That's all the questions I have at the moment, Michael. Thank you.
I have a few questions for you, please, Michael. Who is going to maintain the flag lot driveways? Are these two separate homes considered part of the HOA or not part of the HOA? So the farmhouse and the barn, do either, does anybody know?
I mean, I think that they would be part of the HOA, but there would need to be a separate shared driveway easement and cost sharing agreement for that particular
So
driveway.
then each individual homeowner is responsible for their own driveway in this community.
That's correct.
And it would pertain to these two properties as well.
Yes.
That's fine. Is this, can you tell me how wide this street is? Do you know?
18 feet.
So is that enough for it to be a one-way street or two ways?
Two-way.
It is enough for two ways. Is it intended to be two ways?
It will be two ways, and then the paved area is 18 feet, and then it has a roll curb on the side, so it's actually a little bit wider
Okay,
if need be.
okay. And I didn't catch approximately how big the lot sizes are. I don't need to know each individual one, but approximately.
Currently, they're about 10 to 20,000 square feet,
And that would be what part of an acre?
quarter acre,
Quarter
to half.
Quarter to half. Okay. And are you aware of our street tree program here in East Goshen Township?
Yes.
So who would be maintaining these street trees? And who would be responsible for the maintenance and the removal of them?
I would say the HOA would be.
Because I don't want to continue in this tree business that we're in. In all honesty.
No ash trees.
It's very expensive. No
No.
ash trees, please.
And,
So,
and just to be clear, the applicant obviously is going to have to put together a declaration
Okay.
of restrictions, covenants, and easements. And I'm sure the applicant would not object to certain maintenance responsibilities for the trees in that document.
We would not object to that. And actually, in most of the ones I draft in most municipalities, we have been including a specific paragraph for street trees and making that the jurisdiction of the HOA, so individual property owners don't get involved in that or try to remove things. There's a penalty, usually a provision in there that says if you remove,
well,
you
this,
know.
this also is concerned with the sewer laterals.
yes,
And so in other parts of the township, the sewer lateral is the township responsibility from the clear out to the street, to the main. So who's going to be responsible for the clean out to the house, the homeowner, as it is everywhere else?
Typically in a single family detached community like this, we do put it on the individual homeowner. Usually in townhouse communities, I've started doing it where we're putting it on the HOA, but here I would say it's the individual. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
I have one out of left field, as usual. And maybe the attorneys are going to be able to help me. I would like to know if you can tell me what the restrictions are for a class 2 historical.
So,
Oh,
Pop quiz.
right, I have the ordinance here. Let's see.
Hey.
What kind of restrictions are you looking for? What-
I'm just curious generally, class 2 historical, I think class 1 is the tougher one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Correct.
And class 2,
As far as the uses or
uh,
what modifications you can make?
modifications.
Okay.
My impression is that class 2 will allow you to modify inside, but not outside, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd have to defer to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally speaking in Pennsylvania, the interior structures are not regulated usually by the township. It's just the exterior.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
And
I'm
there's
looking,
more oversight. There's more oversight on a historic resource 1 versus
Correct.
say historic resource 2. So the potentiality for modification of a historic resource 2 on the exterior, the modification potential is greater than and less
Okay.
restrictive, if you want to use the word restrictive.
If we don't have that at hand, maybe we can get somebody to look it up for us. It won't come into play until and unless somebody buys that and wants to renovate it.
Sure.
But I'm just curious what the class 2 designation can.
Frankly, I'm
Counselor.
looking through the ordinance. I don't see much difference between class
No.
1 and class 2.
I think it's maybe more in the demolition process, which we're not proposing to do here. I mean, that's typically where you see the most significant difference. I will say that section 240-38.8 references that an applicant must seek conditional use approval for use, reuse, adaptive reuse, or for modification of area and bulk regulations for a historic resource. So that's why we're saying if somebody wants to come in and do modifications to that exterior, they're going to come back to you for another conditional use specifically for that.
Good, thank you.
I have one question. It's my observation that in modern subdivisions like this, that sidewalks are actually a feature. And I'll note that Troutback, one side of the street has sidewalks that's being built by Mr. Moser at this time. Is there any consideration for sidewalks so that people aren't walking on a 10-foot wide cartway? 18-foot cartway.
Right. Not at this time, just because of how we're kind of isolated.
I have one last question.
Okay.
Is there a sidewalk planned for Hershey's Mill Road?
No,
Thank you.
that was one of the comments that the planning commission said no to.
For example, could you put a walkway in the open space loop there so that people could cross the street and walk safely in the development, and kids aren't?
What do you mean, a stripe walkway or something like that?
No, just sidewalk.
Across the street?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to have TR answer the question.
To answer your question, so the sidewalk, I've put a lot of sidewalks in developments and more people walk down the middle of the road and along the road than the sidewalk in almost every one of my communities. But the goal is for this central space here is that all these homes are clustered together. They have, the thought process is that, you're living in a community, your kids are going out and they're playing in that communal area, or you're going out and you're throwing your ball, or you're doing things in the community in that central area. If they want to walk across it, it's going to be mowed and they can walk across it and get across it. I do not want to put a trail there. I want that to be part of the community, that central living where everyone's, together like a community. That is my hope for this development here.
The Troutback, you put a sidewalk on one side of
Well, and that was because in Willistown, they wanted to connect a bunch of trails. So the trail system there goes from Monument down to Forest. However, they can walk on that trail and then they walk on the trail and they hop on the road and they walk down Forest. And to put in sidewalks in these cluster communities, it truly doesn't add any benefit to it because then you're creating, you have issues with the driveway aprons, and, trying to get those to pitch to work with having kind of a roll curb, which is what's recommended in this open space ordinance. It allows for kind of that more natural curb where you're walking on the side of the road. You can kind of walk in the trail and you can walk in the driveway, and it's not a busy road. So I have young kids and I'd feel very comfortable with them walking around this small niche community.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
No,
Okay,
no.
I think I just have a few, and my apologies if you talked about this already. I may have just spaced out. Availability of water and sewer.
We did talk about
You
that.
did?
Yes, we
Okay.
have a will serve letter from the Township Authority.
Yep.
And we have contacted Aqua for the connection and let them know we're coming.
Okay, very good.
Bill, I don't know where would be a good time to address this, but I would like to at some point. And I don't know if it would be here or land development process, if we should proceed that far, but there was talk about upgrades that were needed for that pump station. Should this proceed, so, and I know there was sort of agreement that, yeah, we would have to contribute to such upgrades, so. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if we have to come to a conclusion at this time, but I would like to get that on record that was discussed and we need to hone in on that at some point.
Right, and that is addressed
Hershey-
in
Hershey, I
exhibit
didn't-
A7. That is
Okay.
the will serve letter from the authority. I assume the applicant has no objection to that.
Thank you.
I have one more question. The creek that comes down will flow under the cartway entrance.
Yes.
Is that right? So there'll just be a culvert underneath the cartway? not
Yeah,
an
my
actual
intention
bridge
is,
or-
my intention is to do a open bottom arch culvert. That you can really make it look natural with there and then keep it in line with the stream channel itself. And that's something that as I work through with DEP and the Conservation District, all the stuff in this corridor, there's a bunch of things that I need to do with floodplain restoration, repairing buffer plantings and all kinds of different things.
Thank you.
Sure.
One other question, Michael, you may have said this before, or Allison, the applicant is proposing this, the road, subdivision road for public dedication,
Yes.
Yes.
public road.
All right, and the Pannoni review letter of October 27th, exhibit B10 at paragraph 15 references that there's some stormwater conveyances through the site from adjacent stormwater management facilities. Can you explain what that looks like and what you're gonna do about it?
Sure. So currently just on the west side of the plan is the Goshen Down Detention Basin. That basin just outfalls out into the pasture. What we'll do is kind of in this area where we're proposing the sanitary sewer easement, possibly trail easement, all of that stuff, we will be coming through with the storm sewer also. And then conveying that down through our two proposed infiltration basins, if need be, maybe an underground system in the central open space, and then ultimately discharging it directly into this creek. So it is our intention to just grab that, get it into a pipe and convey it through. Along with, we just got our survey information back, so I'll be analyzing that basin to see if it's possible to even remove it and just bring the water right through and get rid of that basin.
Okay, great. What's? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
This is the basin, yeah, to the
Yeah,
west
right.
of the property that's owned by the township.
Yeah, right where you were just putting your pen.
Talk a little bit, I think you said you objected to a proposed trail or sidewalk along Hershey's Mill Road. Can you explain that again as well, and a little bit why you object to that?
Sure. So right immediately off of the edge of the road, kind of in the right of way area, we have the existing stream. We have some floodplain issues. We have wetlands that almost go right up, especially on the southern property, go right up to the edge of the road. So to try and get a sidewalk system in there would take some real effort. On top of it, there is nothing to connect to the south because that's immediately where the stream crosses under Hershey Mill. To the north, I think the grade falls off pretty steeply, so it really would be kind of the walkway to nowhere.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill, may I have one question?
Please.
And it may, Michael, you may not be able to answer this. Can someone tell me the cartway width of Tanglewood Drive on the other side of Hershey's Mill Road? I don't know whether you know it.
Unfortunately, not off the top of my head. I have
Okay.
it shown on the plan, but I just traced it by aerial.
All right, there was a comment in the Pannoni letter about the board could require active recreation areas. There are none proposed for this at this time, is that correct?
Not any formal, but that was the intention of the central green, that was more active, and then the perimeter open space would be passive.
Okay. And speaking of the open space, the HOA is going to maintain that. I assume the declaration, this is probably a question for Ms. Zaro. I assume the declaration will meet all of the requirements in our ordinance to talk about the preservation and perpetuity of that open space?
Yes.
I don't think I have any further questions. If the board doesn't have any further questions, I think it's appropriate to start heading over to other parties.
Um,
All right.
Can I ask one more question?
Please.
So if there's a basin at the bottom of this development, this infiltration basin, is that going to be maintained by the HOA?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Do any parties have questions for this witness? Yep, Mr. McGill, come on up. Yep. Make sure you speak into the microphone.
Again, my name is Ron McGill from 1050 Hershey Mill Road. Please excuse my distrust of the current crop of engineers that have stuck me with the Hershey Mill battleship across the street from my house, but we'll leave that for another meeting.
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
I can't hear you.
Yeah, you need to stand
and,
right in
Anyway,
You focus on the questions at hand. that we
Yeah,
appreciate.
and I am. So have you seen a regulation that states that there should be a 300-foot buffer from any historic home in Chester County?
I would object to that. That's not an ordinance.
It used to be on the books. I know it was there when I bought my home. We should all look
Do you-
for that. I don't know where it is, but I know it used to be there.
We can certainly take a look at to see if that is still there.
Okay. so-
And that would be something that would come out in land development as well. Right now, just to be clear, this is a concept. We're talking about the use in general. Once we get into land development, as was explained earlier, the township's engineer and zoning officer and myself will take a fine tooth comb over the plans to make sure it complies with all of the township's ordinances.
Okay. I believe that's out there for the record. I was gonna ask if you're gonna have curbing on the street, and I think the answer was yes on curbing.
Internal streets, yes.
Okay. Have you done a study on how many gallons per hour in a 100-year storm would flow from this street and the added impervious coverage of this neighborhood into the stream bed?
On a rough analysis, yes, and that'll be in land development. It'll be a fine analysis going through and how the infiltration beds and infiltration systems will handle that.
Okay, because even one more gallon overwhelms what used to be the Hershey Mill Dam. So in the event that there is an increase in water load to the Green Hill Road culverts, where we already have a problem, will Moser assume the cost of increasing that capacity underneath Hershey Mill Road? Because there is an impact there of any more impervious coverage. And what I mean by that is currently any 100-year storm or even a 50-year storm causes water to overflow Green Hill Road, which was the impetus for them tearing down the dam. The culverts are inadequate to handle even one more gallon of increased impervious
is there-
coverage
Yeah,
above that.
Could you, do you have a question related to that? This is
Okay,
the time for
so-
questioning, not
so I'm
testimony.
asking if you've done a study that engages all the way down to the Green Hill Road impact. That's the question.
No, my study would be, I would have a stormwater analysis. I'd also have a floodplain study to ensure that our proposed road crossing would not cause any undue hardship. As I noted, we're also looking to remove the existing driveway and do some floodplain restoration, which will actually
Okay.
help increase the capacity to the corridor. So it's all of the stuff. I'll be the township engineer, the conservation district, DEP, all these groups will be ensuring that I'm following the regulations that I need to.
Okay, so I would again alert the township to the fact that even one more gallon down at Hershey Mill can't be handled. So unless they can capture 100%
Sir,
of every drop of
I would
water up
object
there.
that this should be a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. McGill,
Okay.
you need
I'm
to stick
sorry.
to questions.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm just trying to
That's all right.
get my
Yep.
points across.
That's all right. You'll have an.
So you have
opportunity-
not done a study that engages how much water load you're going to add to the old Hershey Mill Dam site and Green Hill Road? That's the question.
No.
Okay, you have not. All right. So are you anticipating a stop sign on Hershey Mill Road like you guys did on Forest?
Our intention right now is to put a stop sign at the end of our road across from Tanglewood, thank you.
Okay,
But not, Forest Lane was a little different. That was, the township required it. There was some warrants for that, but in this case, I don't believe we need warrants for a full stop sign.
okay, I would hope not. And have you done a study on exactly how much traffic during school bus hours and that sort of thing would have to potentially stop at a stop sign there? Or exactly what the traffic patterns of Hershey Mill Road are?
I have not, I'm not a traffic engineer.
Okay. So in your studies of this housing development that you're looking for, what is the projected average number of residents in each one of these homes?
That I wouldn't know either.
Okay. Who would know that?
I don't think it's necessarily relevant, but
How do we know how much sewer impact we're gonna have until we know how many residents will be in each home?
so I think that that's more of a general question that we can answer. So each municipality, including East Goshen and their sewer authority, has something that they call an EDU or equivalent dwelling unit. And that is an assigned number that's based on the type of housing. So I'm talking more generally. And Michael can talk more specifically to it, but that is actually regulated by both the municipality and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. But Michael can sort of explain that in a little more detail here.
So typically what an authority or a plant manager would do is they know what their capacity is. They know how many connections they are, and they just divide that number. So if you look at different municipalities, DEP standard for like an on-lot septic system is 400 gallons per day. That's really based on a 4-bedroom house, 100 gallons per day. But when you get into municipalities with a formal system, treatment plants, you're looking at somewhere between 200 to 250, 270 gallons per day. So when we file our planning module application, we'll basically say we have 15, multiply that number, and that's our.
Okay, so you're not taking into consideration the current demographic that is moving into all the new construction in this area. And I can tell you that I'm involved in lots of other properties nearby, and we're seeing the demographics based on a study of 10 years ago don't comply with what's happening right now.
Mr. McGill, do you have a question?
Okay, so you don't know how many students they're gonna have, how many residents they're gonna have, and therefore you can't know how many gallons of sewage you're really gonna use,
Wait
other
a
than
minute,
your
hold on.
previous.
Hold it up here. Mike, you can answer that, can't you?
As far as
What do you mean?
The municipal authority and
With
handling-
regard to the municipal authority, I'm not sure whether the EDU is somewhere around 320 gallons per day. As far as assessing how many people are going to be occupying a house, I can't speak for the developer, but the developer wouldn't know. They know the number of bedrooms they're going to put in and the capacity that someone could have in a house, whether you have 4 children, 6 children, or what have you. This is public sewer. It's not on-site systems. Therefore, the impact to the underlying water, groundwater capacity for an on-site system to manage a particular flow from a residence is not relevant in this case, since it's public sewer. The sewer plant has plenty of capacity to handle these connections, and I think the municipal authority has already alluded to that informally at one of its meetings, knowing that this was coming up for a requested series of connections.
Okay.
Mike Lynch
Can I-
is the liaison with the municipal
Okay,
authority.
okay,
and
well,
he's-
Mike, I respect your opinion, but you're 100% wrong.
All right, well, right
And-
now's not the time
Okay.
for arguing. Right now's the time for
Okay.
questioning Mr. Hartman.
All right,
please.
so, Mr. Hartman, are you aware that the current pumping station at the corner of Hershey Mill and Green Hill Road does not have the capacity for any more sewage?
That was noted in their full serve letter. That we
Okay.
have to evaluate that.
And is Moser willing to pay all the cost of increasing the capacity of that pumping station, since they would be the impetus for more load?
I think that I can answer that from a legal perspective. That's actually governed by there is a Municipal Authorities Act in Pennsylvania that governs cost sharing. So if we are doing additional upgrades and there are additional connections later, there's actually a specific statute that governs that. But to the extent that we've already acknowledged that that upgrade would be needed, and that's something we would
Okay.
discuss during the land
So the
development
second
process in
question
detail.
to that is, will my tax dollars be needed to pay for part of that pumping station increased capacity?
I don't think I have enough information to even answer
If
that
you're only
question
gonna pay
right
for
now.
part, then I gotta pay.
Well,
the
no,
other.
that's what I'm saying. We haven't designed anything yet, so that's,
Okay.
something.
Well, I woke
But
up this
certainly it's an
morning with-
upgrade that
Whenever,
would, yeah.
whenever we have a
Yeah.
new home built in the township, we service it. And we have the
Sure.
capacity according to
Yes,
Mike
and
and the
we-
municipal.
We
authority.
did not. I woke up to them
Capacity.
cleaning.
Yeah,
up.
hold on, hold on.
Can't
Yeah.
take it all at one time. Let me comment if I might.
Yeah.
I referred to capacity for the sewer system. I was not referring to the pump station and the capacity of it. If it needs upgrades, the municipal authority will evaluate that, and there will be under the act, there will be a responsible responsibility taken by both parties if necessary, but the developer will have an active party in necessary upgrades once the design is determined and the type of pumps or other elements of the pump station. So in that regard, there will be improvements necessary to that pump station.
I-
But
That's
before
what
you
you're
go on,
referring to, yeah.
before you go on, let me just state, and Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong, but taxpayer dollars are not used for sewer improvements.
Correct.
Then where do they come from?
sewer rates.
Sewer rates, sewer ratepayers, there's a tapping fee that is paid by
Okay.
each person that connects. So it's not
Okay.
taxpayer dollars. It is
It's sewer payer dollars.
correct.
Sorry, it was this pocket, not this one. Okay, okay.
All right.
Either way, I think that for the record, we've already acknowledged that
Okay.
we certainly would be, involved, and
Sure.
if we need to do an upgrade, we need to do an upgrade.
Another question. Are you aware of all the lead pipes that lace that property? And are you gonna do anything about lead pipe remediation?
I would object. That's not something that's part of this, wasn't touched
Be
on.
happy to show you where they are,
All
because I
right,
know where they are.
Let me,
Any- Anyway,
hold on, Mr. McGill, hold on. So you're claiming that there are environmental contaminants on the property?
I
in some-
know it. I can show you where they are.
Okay. Is the applicant aware of any environmental contaminants on the property? Mr. Moser indicated no. Mr. Hartman?
Okay.
Okay, and during the land development phase, if it turns out that there are, then they would be addressed
Okay.
appropriately.
You'll find it from the cistern down to the house and out to the barn. Anyway.
Yeah, Mr. McGill, you need
I'm
to
sorry.
speak up and stick
I
to the
was
question.
alerting them to the fact that there's a cistern on the property that has lead pipes that go to the house, the old spring house, and to the barn. And they can find it from there. Another question regarding setbacks. Somebody said something about 3 feet setbacks. What are our setback regulations in East Goshen Township?
For this development, I think it's 1 foot off the property line. It's 30 feet from structure to structure. And that's, in this development option, is really meaningful
Okay,
to do a denser cluster development.
so our 40-foot set, a question for the board. Don't we all have like 30 feet from side and back and 40 feet from the street in anything that we normally do?
So there are certain setback requirements in the single-family open space development ordinance that apply.
Okay.
And I mean, I can give you a copy of the ordinance afterwards if you'd like a copy.
Yeah, I thought it was minimum 40 feet. Let's see. So.
And just to be clear, again, that's something that will be covered in land development as
Got
well.
it. Okay, you mentioned that the roads are 18 feet wide. And that each house will have a total capacity of 3 parking spaces. Is that correct?
Yes.
So where will guests park? On an 18-foot wide street?
Don't really have a provision for it. It's
And-
not a requirement.
Sure.
So nobody can have any people over for dinner or have a family gathering at Christmas time? No. Okay. I think.
I mean, typically there would be on-street parking,
But there won't be. And that's a long way to walk down to Hershey Mill, which also doesn't have any parking on it. So you're gonna increase parking on Tanglewood for guests to walk all the way up this hill and visit these people.
we didn't necessarily would say that there wouldn't be on-street parking.
Yes.
The
So
ordinance
just
has
to
a
be-
minimum, yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
One at a time.
So are you assuming the guests would park on Tanglewood Road? Which would be wide enough for 2 lanes of traffic to go next to a parked car?
No, Mr. McGill, it's my understanding that they haven't restricted parking
Right.
on this road, so they could park on the road here.
So how wide is a typical car, including mirrors and,
It's also rolled. So it's.
so they can park on their yard?
And our ordinances would address these issues,
Okay.
just to be clear.
So that brings most of my questions. I'll have a statement at the end, but that's related to the engineering side of things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGill. Do any other parties have questions for Mr. Hartman? Okay. It was Ms. Oshop?
So did you, in the design of this, I was curious if you considered larger lots and fewer homes, just to kind of go with the current aesthetic. The Goshen Downs lots are 1 acre and you're talking about these being 1/4 to half. It just seems very clustered and maybe a little bit out of place with the rest of the geography. And the other homes on Hershey Mill Road, I don't even know what their acreage is, but it's likely in double digits for many of them. I mean, you could still ask a fair amount of money for a lot of land.
So what we'd like to do is we like to go with wider lots. Also, unfortunately, because of planning purposes, we also try to put the biggest footprint possible shown on these plans so we can over design for stormwater and make sure that we have enough stormwater management design. So when we put a plan here, I know it does look kind of ugly, but we don't build this same footprint over and over in the community. But we do plan for the biggest possible home. So it kind of doesn't really show the best picture, but we're doing that so we can make sure we cover the impervious surface of the development. And again, we like to go with the wider lots that look into wide open space than the narrow lot that looks into a narrow yard. Because again, what we see now in a lot of these cluster developments is that you do the wider lot that makes you feel like you have a bigger backyard, and then that the HOA maintains all that open space and it is all preserved for the rest of the community. And that you're able to preserve a lot of the natural resources of that property as well. So the plan might not show it really well, but it is our intention with these wider lots to have a better aesthetic plan that we're doing the current.
So I think that's 7, 8, 9, so like that, where the property line ends and then that's the green space, is that the HOA would be responsible for maintaining that area?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Hartman from other parties? Any further questions from the board for Mr. Hartman? Any redirect?
I have no redirect.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hartman.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Ms. Zaro, do you have any other further witnesses?
I do not. I would request to move my exhibits into evidence.
And I believe. Yep, exhibits A1 through A8 have all been adequately addressed by witnesses, so I believe it's appropriate that they would be admitted to the record. Before I go to parties. Actually, let me take a show of hands. How many parties intend to present their own evidence or testimony tonight? Anyone? That means, are you do you want to come up and talk about the development and explain the impact it would have on your property or why you think it's good or bad?
Yeah.
And, okay, how many? I see 3. We've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. I think, do you want to continue? Do you want to take a break? Do you want to finish up? What do you want to do?
Continue.
All right. Kara, are you okay? Do you need a break?
When you say continue,
Kara,
continue the hearing
let's
to
do
another
this.
date?
No, no. I meant just
Continue
continue
the
this
hearing to
evening.
another date or continue it?
Yeah, let's take 3 minutes. Yeah,
Very
let's take 3 minutes and then we'll go to the parties.
Yeah, okay.
3 minutes.
Okay.
Which means no more than 5. All right. Is everybody ready to go back on the record? Everybody ready? Okay.
We're ready.
All right. We're going to go back on the record now, after taking a brief recess. At this point, we are going to go into testimony from the parties to this proceeding. I'm going to call them in the order that they were granted party status and ask if you would like to come up and present evidence or testimony about the application. So first is Ms. McManus.
So I would like to first thank actually the developers for taking the neighbors' considerations into account as far as the easement for the walkway. It is not something that the neighbors on Jackson Lane are interested in. I am concerned about the safety of my young family. I have a son on the spectrum who it's a struggle for me to teach him every day lessons in safety, and creating another open space for a child who has a tendency to elope is extremely concerning to me. I'd really like the board to please consider striking that walkway easement from the plan. I'm not here to necessarily oppose the development. I do have maybe some more concerns today than I did before about the water management that might now be impacting the sewer basin in Goshen Downs, but truly my main primary concern is for the safety of my children. Please strike the walkway. It's not a walkway to anywhere. It's not serving a purpose that the neighbors are asking for. It wasn't even in the original developer's plans. It was something that the board requested, not at any impetus of the neighbors. And I'd really, really ask that we just strike that from the plan for the safety of my young children and my son in particular. That's my statement.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the board have questions for Ms. McManus? Ms. Zarro?
I have no questions.
Any other parties? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your statement, though.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Cody,
Is
did
that all you
you?
were gonna do too?
No, I just had a clarification. Was it something that was brought up by the board or was it by the planning commission for the easement?
I believe it's when at one of the earlier meetings, a member of the board here made a suggestion
At
for a
a
walking
supervisor
trail.
meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
And our request at the engineering meeting, I can't remember exactly, maybe that's the planning meeting. They ignored the statements and the interest of those who are directly impacted, like myself, Allison, my neighbor, Sharon, who would all have potential strangers walking through our yards that we're not interested in doing, where I very specifically bought a home on a closed loop cul-de-sac for many reasons. And it was not to open it up to an additional walking trail for people that we don't know, or to create an easy access point for my son to elope from.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Oshop?
So without repeating everything that Natalie said, I'll go back to what I said before that I feel like maybe you didn't really address was I'm suggesting fewer homes on larger lots, not wide, narrow, whatnot. I understand that would have a financial impact on your investment on this property, but I just don't really think that it goes with the aesthetic of this area of East Goshen Township.
Thank you. Hold on. Any questions from the board? Ms. Zarro?
No questions.
Other parties? All right. Did you have a question for her or? Okay. Ms. Fedor, do you have any question or do you have any testimony to present? All right, Mr. McGill, you're up.
All right.
Remember, stay close to the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. This was a prepared statement, but good evening, of course. I'm glad you haven't quite made up your minds yet about changing the zoning regulation that your predecessors designed to protect the long-term value and continuity of our township. By their design, we have preserved all the open space and historic-like atmosphere that drew all of us here. We have a good mix of high-density housing and commercial space along the high-capacity roads and 1 acre zoning with open space and great views along the smaller country roads laced with historical buildings and lots of wildlife. Everything has a place in this township. We have 55 and over community, we have New Kent apartments, we have high density. North of Green Hill Road was never intended to be high density. Those predecessors that you had, and we discussed this when the Lewis property came up, they would never have allowed a postage stamp of high density housing to stand in the middle of R2 zoning as this plan shows. Those with influence did all of that work for us and created the regulations so that we could appreciate what they created. For 29 years, I have watched East Goshen and the surrounding area farms get developed, and I lamented the traffic increase that came with it. But I was comforted in knowing that that could never happen to Hershey Mill Road. The R2 zoning has been in place since each of the current owners, meaning the Millers, because this deal I don't think has actually gone through yet, the Lewises, the Fedors, me, everybody that owns these historic properties, we all knew what we were buying. And we knew if we wanted to subdivide that there might be a couple of houses to put on your land. But that was after you would remove the wetlands, after you put in the impervious coverage for a road, and then had 1 acre lots. And that is the regulation. I would implore you to abide by that R2 restriction. And if Mr. Moser wants to build 5 really nice houses up there, it'll pass. But this should not. So regarding the regulations, R2 zoning has always been the capacity of our, or the rules of our area up there. And I don't know where this current open space contingent came from, but it has never happened in that part of the township before. And regarding impervious coverage and runoff, they clearly do not have their studies correct. The township made a bad decision when removing the Hershey Mill Dam, which eliminated the detention basin effect, which has already worsened flooding on Green Hill Road. And that's evidenced by what's happened since that dam came out. This property, even 1 gallon running down that road and adding water into that stream is going to increase that problem. And I would think there will be a legal action from 1034 Hershey Mill Road, which is a young guy who just spent $1.2 million renovating the mill there. He's going to be impacted. And any traffic that is goes through the deep water on Green Hill Road that is increased because of this will also potentially have legal action against everybody here who makes these decisions that increases that water. Now, unless Mr. Moser wants to pay for a proper larger bridge on Green Hill Road to increase that water capacity, that would alleviate that problem. The sewage pumping station is currently under capacity and can't handle 1 more gallon of sewage. Maybe the treatment center can, but that pumping station cannot. I woke up this morning at 5:30 a.m. to all the flashing lights out there where they were working on it, and it happens monthly. We can't handle anymore. I think it's also important to think about the impact on schools. And maybe you guys don't care about this, but I own a bunch of property in Downingtown and down in Exton. And the demographic studies that they've used to approve all the building in Chester County are completely flawed. The demographic that's moving in is having 5 or 6 kids. They're overwhelming every single bit of infrastructure in Chester County. We can't afford any more traffic, any more students, any more sewer, any more water. All of those things come into play when you try and overdevelop a site like this. So, sorry, I had a couple other notes here. And so in the end, I urge you to vote no to any variances or conditional use changes to all R2 properties in East Goshen Township. There are only a few historic properties left to protect. And while I would never take away someone's right to subdivide and turn a small profit, I am asking you to stick to the rules that we all agreed on when we bought these properties. And that's the end of my statement.
Do any members
So-
of the board have questions?
I'm not a member of the board, but I do have to make a clarifying statement, just because there was zoning change mentioned a lot in that speech. This is not a zoning change. This is a conditional use. Conditional use and variance is apples and oranges. This is a legal use under the R2 district with conditions. I just want to make that very clear to the audience and to people listening on Zoom that we're not talking about a zoning change legally. I need that to be known.
But
Are
it's
you-
a variance of some
It
kind.
it is not a variance. No, it is not. It is a legal use under the R2 district.
And when did that get approved?
I wasn't here. I don't know.
Also, if my recollection is correct.
Yeah.
It's 16 acres,
It is 16 acres.
15 houses on 16 acres.
No.
But half of it's
But-
wetlands.
But a lot of it is open space. The
Well,
open space.
If you take the wetlands out,
It's
Hold on,
still
one person at a
Yeah,
time.
sorry.
One person at a
15
time.
houses on 16 acres. The other point I want to make is that we had to take the dam out. We were ordered by the Army Corps of Engineers to take it out. We fought with the DEP. Michelle did that. And we weren't happy with that either. We spent $1.5 million on that.
well,
And I wasn't arguing for or against the
Right.
board making a vote one way or the other. I just want to be clear legally that this is an allowable use under the R2 district currently. That's it.
That brings up another point, Bill. We don't vote on this tonight.
Correct. After you hear all of the testimony this evening, and then we'll listen to public comment, we're going to close the record, and that's the last that's going to be said about it. The board then has 45 days to render a decision. And that deliberation on the decision and any potential conditions occurs in executive session. It is not a public process. You are sitting as a quasi judicial board. So it is exempt from Sunshine Act requirements.
so I do have one other question then. Where does it say that the acre averaging doesn't first remove at least wetlands?
That's something I'm not sure that the board can specifically cite to anything right now, but all of that obviously will come out in land development as well. When the developer, an applicant submits plans that have all of the detailed zoning regulations and how they comply.
Okay. Well, I wish everybody luck.
Thank
you.
you.
Ms. Zari, did you have any questions?
I did not have any
Okay.
questions. I was going to make the same clarification and at some point to say that this is a permitted use and we're not seeking a zoning change.
Right.
Thank you
That's
to
it.
everybody who had a comment. We appreciate your comments and questions, and we have to take all of that into consideration now as we move forward. So thank you.
Right. And so, any other parties have anything further to say? Ms. Zari, did you have any rebuttal?
I don't, other than, I mean, I think it's generally been covered. I would say that, just generally speaking, what we've touched on, this is a permitted use. We believe we've met the criteria for approval. We are not seeking any variance relief. We are not seeking any zoning changes. And ultimately, this site, we have calculated a gross lot area and a net lot area, which still equates to 1 house per acre, even though it's a cluster development, which is not something that I would consider very dense compared to other types of dense development. And we believe that we have met the criteria.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, before we move on, I do need to ask, is there any public comment? This is the time for non-parties to provide public comment. It cannot be used for evidentiary purposes. The board cannot rely on this in making their decision, but we do have to allow public comment. Mr. Guyer?
Do we still have a person on Zoom?
And this, before you speak, just so everyone knows, public comment does not mean, we don't get the opportunity to ask Mr. Geyer questions unless he chooses to entertain them, but this is just for comment purposes, not evidentiary purposes.
Bill Geyer, 1560 Tanglewood Drive. We just asked the board to respect the request from the impacted homeowners in Goshen Downs to not pursue both a trail, connecting trail, nor an easement for a future trail, so that they don't have that future threat as well and not have that lurking over them. The second request would be that the board, there was some discussion about potential cost implications to township residents. So I would ask the board to look at the potential cost implications before making a final approval decision. There was discussion, so the township will maintain the sewer, will maintain the road. So that's ongoing sewer inspections, maintenance, the road paving, repaving, repairs. Would ask the board to make some assumptions about what do they expect to be the revenue, the tax revenue, both real estate property tax and earned income tax from the proposed demographics and the property values for these homes. And make, before approval, make sure that they feel that the tax revenues will be sufficient to not impact other township residents with increased taxes. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment? Just state your name and address before you provide your comment, please.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Geyer, 1560 Tanglewood Drive. Again, ask the board to respect the easement. We have an easement of public access to the tennis courts on our property. We share it with our neighbor. But when we bought the house, and it's on our deed, but it was also drawn into our neighborhood's plan. So if there's an easement and it's not on, when you go to sell the properties, that the people who buy that house will know, the rest of the neighborhood won't know. And like Bill mentioned, it'll be kind of a looming possibility for the, rest of the time until that deed is changed to remove the easement. So it is an important thing, even though there's no trail, that looming possibility. I would hope that the board would respect the current homeowners and even the future homeowners, residents of East Goshen Township. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anything else from the board? Then with that, we will close the record. The applicant's exhibits have been admitted, and the board will render a decision within 45 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You need to do some hand exercises.
Ready?
No, 45 days.
All right, we're going to keep it moving here. We've got to,
Okay, good.
we've got to finish our meeting, folks. If you're going to talk, please do it out in the lobby. David, number 7, financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of December 31st, net of pass-throughs, the general fund had year-to-date revenues of $11,951,636. Expenses of $11,901,579 for a surplus of $50,057. And I want to make clear, this is a preliminary. We're still making some adjustments, and the auditors are going to come the last week of January, and they may have further suggestions for us.
Dave, let me interrupt you and ask. I was under the impression we had a larger surplus. Am I incorrect there?
It's a little bit less misleading. I actually answered a question from Mike about it, and I wanted to kind of explain a little further. So we basically had 500,000, which was what the projected surplus was. 200,000 of that went to the Infrastructure Sustainability Fund, 250 went as an additional cap reserve contribution. And so that remaining 50,000 was what was left in general.
I see. So we put it away for a rainy day.
Yeah, it was basically, we had 500,000
I
surplus.
understand.
Yep.
As
Thank
part
you.
of the 2022 budget year. So that's why it's reflected in the bottom line there. Yeah,
I got it.
yeah, I had similar questions, John.
So the revenue finished 10% higher than budget, 4% higher than prior year. The EIT collections, building permits, real estate transfer tax, parks and rec programs, and higher interest earnings, as well as a $75,000 10-year renewal payment for Liberty Towers land lease agreement, drove the increase versus the budget. About 500,000 of that was 550,000 was the EIT versus a low projection. Majority of that EIT is in the 23 budget. Actual 2022 expenses are about 10% over budget and 4.5% prior year. Sewer and stormwater costs, park programs, class expenses, maintenance, fuel, tree removal costs, EIT commissions, and the year-to-date transfers that are at the end of the year that I just mentioned drove the expenses higher than the budget. Net result from actual operations after the transfers is $50,000 higher than budget. While 2022 was a challenging year for inflation and supply chain costs, we did exceed expectations primarily due to the EIT receipts. It was $550K of our $1.1 million budget revenue surplus. And looking forward into 23, we've built anticipated recurring revenue expenses into the proposed budget revenue. Those are including EIT, building permits, and the higher interest earnings, as well as higher interfund operating transfers. I have all the fund balances preliminary for 2022 listed at the bottom. Questions on preliminary December 2022?
Anybody? No, thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
What are we up to? Approval of minutes.
There are no minutes.
Minutes.
Treasurer's report.
Is that Dave again?
Yeah, it's me.
We're working him hard.
So the treasurer's report for the weeks of December 29th, 2022 through January 12th, 2023. $769,000 in Q4 2022 recharges.
See you, Kara.
Those are for Goshen Fire, the Sewer Operating Fund, the Refuse Fund, and Municipal Authority, which drove the general fund revenue over this period. We incurred regular routine operating expenses in the general fund, including our January WEGO payments, salt purchases in preparation for winter, a new cyber security policy, which the MFA that we got, multi-factor authentication, we got instituted this past year, enabled us to be able to renew that policy. This $16,000 is for the full year, and it's a $2 million policy. January premiums for workers' comp and medical were also processed. Our capital fund expenses include the pickleball resurfacing that was previously approved by the board, as well as scheduled public works and office capital replacement. We had 2022 budget surplus transfers previously approved, $250,322 from general fund to cap reserve, and $200,258 to infrastructure sustainability. Questions on the bills?
In other words, if I had read ahead on this, I wouldn't have had to ask you the question.
It's all right.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the receipts and approve the expenditures as presented in the expenditure registered and summarized in the treasurer's report.
Second.
Thank you. Comments from the board?
No, thank you, David.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Comments from the room?
Cody, you want your update?
Yeah,
report?
board off, please. Yes.
So $180,236 has been passed to Portnoy. The total collected is $68,631, so almost 40% collected to
Great.
date.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Excellent. Question? No questions? No hands up on
That was good,
Zoom?
Mayor.
Nope.
Okay, call the question then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It passes. Thank you. No old business, new business. The memorandum of understanding with WEGO regarding the equitable sharing program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will start off here and then I'll let Bill jump in if needed. This has sort of been a 11-month process in the making, mainly because there's no blueprint for it. As I say, it's a pretty lengthy memo. The Department of Justice essentially has what is called an equitable sharing program. So forfeited property from criminal cases, police agencies can retain some of that money that they're involved in and use it for certain aspects of their operation. Usually, the agency in question gets this money distributed to them directly. Because WeGo is not because it is a multi-jurisdiction and a regional police department governed by a commission, they cannot get a hold of the funds directly. They cannot obtain the funds directly. It has to be through a municipality, mainly because we are able to do what is called a single audit, and that is a threshold of $750,000. So then, for example, we did it for the COVID funds and things of that nature. WeGo cannot do that because they are not a incorporated municipality. So we have been talking with WeGo. We made it out with Bill and also their attorney in order to essentially have custody of these funds on behalf of WeGo. And they would pay us for administrative work, but we would essentially have the funds. We would not have any leeway or ability to tell them what to do with it. We were simply just doing clerical work on behalf of WeGo. That is pretty much it. They do not have any funds currently. This is sort of future proofing, looking ahead. And because there could be some cases that are coming up that they believe that it could come into play. So Bill, I don't know if there's anything to add, but that is essentially what I understand it to be.
Yeah.
And WeGo has already signed it. by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That was a great overview, Derek. And just to let the board know, the way this is set up is that the township will hold the funds. We're going to act as their bank. We're going to have no discretion whatsoever over the use of the funds. That will be up to the police department. But they're also indemnifying us for everything. So if they use the funds incorrectly and the feds want their money back, that's on them, not on us. We just should write the check. And we set that up intentionally because we don't want any responsibility over this. It's not our money. We cannot use this to offset any money that we would give to WeGo via our budgeting process.
That was the question I was gonna
Yeah.
ask.
So it is theirs for,
When you say we go, are we talking the police commission or the
Yes.
police department?
the,
Police commission directs the funding and spending, so.
there you go.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we have been in touch with the Department of Justice on this and they're fine with the agreement.
Yep.
But the money would flow in as revenue in the police budget.
No,
It would be a
No.
distinct.
It would be its
almost an
own
escrow
fund.
account.
Yeah.
Oh.
it's like an escrow account. Exactly. It's not our money,
Yeah.
but we are just holding it for them.
But
So when they spend it, how does it appear on their budget?
They will, I don't know how it will appear on theirs. But they will submit a request to us
For
to
expense.
refund or to reimburse them for their expenses.
And will it go through the police commission?
That's what
Yes.
we
Yes.
just said.
Yes, I just want to confirm. I just wanted to hear you
Yeah.
say that again.
You
But I-
have to watch Michelle.
But I think to David's point, there is
Might start
potential budget implications on the positive.
I might want to be the police commissioner for a while. I
Yeah.
might start traveling a little bit more.
You travel enough already.
Do we have any idea what the breadth of this,
The monies could be.
largesse, you know, how
Yeah,
much
it
this would be?
could be anywhere from nothing to many millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So a couple Ferraris are sold because of a drug bust or
Yes.
something,
Yep.
et cetera.
Or-
It could be
Yes.
Big time.
And the
dollars.
Fed takes their share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Fed
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
their share.
Or the red.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're the littlest of all the fish.
And again, there's nothing in the hopper, so to speak, right now.
And the
We
the
will,
police,
we will see a record of this as we do the reimbursement.
correct, you will approve the checks, but you have no discretion whatsoever as to
That's-
whether
at
you're going
least
to
we'll
cut the
see it.
check or not.
But we do have a recharge rate that we will
Yeah.
charge them to do the clerical work as well.
I'll be
Yeah.
setting up a new fund, kind of like the ARPA fund, that'll be
Okay.
tracked we'll have to get the funds deposited directly there, clean trail. It'll be audited by Mally, like a single federal audit, like
Okay.
Derek
And
mentioned.
monthly, just the way you provide a fund balance report, the commission would at least see what the fund balance is in that escrow. And obviously, any request for disbursement would come through the commission at that time to authorize release.
It should come through, yes, but I would think that, so they would authorize the release, and then when we reimburse them, it'll show up as,
Right.
I can show you that report.
So the commission essentially, they can't control it, but they could affirm the request for the disbursement, and then it will be reflected in the ledger, if you will, for their escrow fund.
That's
Okay.
my understanding.
question is really around the fact that this is non-recurring revenue.
Correct.
And it,
Yeah.
it should be used for non-recurring expenses, i.e. capital expenses and things like that. So that that's the nature of my question.
That's not a question, that's a statement. That's a good statement.
Yeah.
It's a good
They-
thing, but we can't control that.
We're not going to control that. The federal government will control it.
But
The federal government has pages and pages of regulations regarding how this money can be spent by the police department. But all of that obligation on figuring out what they can use it for is on them. I made sure the township has nothing to do with it.
that's the
And they're paying,
indemnification.
they're paying for everything. They
If any-
paid legal fees for preparing
If
this.
anybody's in trouble,
Net zero for the township.
It's on me.
No, Bill did a good job in indemnification.
Okay.
well, I'm.
We had one comment and it had to do with that I covered everything.
But unfortunately, if they had a windfall and hired another police officer, which
No.
would, you know.
The
continue-
commission-
Personnel's
the
not
The
permitted.
commission could control the.
Well, the future.
Commission would say
They-
no.
They could hire, but they better put a caveat on it to say, you know, the position has to be funded going forward. When these funds run out, it's up to the.
But to-
If I recall correctly, I don't think personnel's.
No, but the
permitted.
bills,
No.
the feds would actually nix that prior to it getting
Yeah.
there, because it's not a part of the,
Okay,
what it's allowed for.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the signing of the memorandum of understanding between Westtown, East Goshen Regional Police Department and East Goshen Township, which would allow East Goshen to act as the repository for the department for any funds received through the equitable sharing program.
I second that.
Thank you. Any comment from the board?
No.
From the floor? Any comment on Zoom? None? Are you hearing none? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for your work on this,
Thank you.
Bill and Derek. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dave is Bill.
And Dave, excuse me, Dave.
No, no problem.
Did you just touch that?
You just touched that.
Okay, on the back page.
She just touched that.
Yep, consider resolution 2023-04, amending resolution 94-21, changing the meeting and time and dates for the historical commission.
Thank- Thank you,
Derek,
Mr.
is
Yep.
this yours?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this goes back to our conversation on the historical commission we had about changing the nature of the historical commission, possibly getting rid of the historical commission. So Bill and I still have a lot to work towards accomplishing some of those goals and giving some of the responsibilities the historical commission had to other ABCs. This is sort of a stopgap we needed to pass because what we put in the 2023 ad was that the historical commission would meet as needed. And then we also have to change the size of the membership so there is no quorum issues when they do meet. So this is essentially just trying to keep in with what we passed in the ad, because the resolution that was passed back in 1994 specifically cites the meeting times and dates. So we just need to give us the flexibility that we sort of already passed.
All right, so you feel comfortable with this, the way you put it together and going forward?
I do. And again, we have some work to do on this whole historical commission thing, but this is just to get us to the end game at some point.
Mr. Chair, I move we adopt resolution 2023, number 4, resolution amending resolution 94-21 to change the historical commission meeting dates and membership size.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board?
I do have one question. We do have at least 3 members on the historical commission at this point, right?
We do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are we actively seeking participants?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
Yes. Yes, I put it on every one of them for part of the ABC, we're actively seeking for blah, blah, blah.
Only because we have an application that has some historic resources that may need to be looked at by them at some point soon?
Yeah, so we were talking internally today that Ted Roberts, who's chair of the historical commission, would work in conjunction with Dwayne to be able to accomplish that if necessary.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. As long
And
as it's
we,
being
would we
contemplated.
need, Bill, a particular footnote in that review to say that, because of the lack of membership, this was what we had to do? In other words, can that process, that assessment by essentially two parties now be confounded by, say, a party of interest filing an appeal to that? Is it, I guess anything can be appealed.
Potentially, I mean, if your ordinance says the historical commission shall review this, and you don't have a historical commission, then that could be a defect in the approval process, that could be appealed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Who would they appeal to?
Us.
Oh, no.
Court of
On the Court of Common
This
Pleas,
would
they
go
would
to
appeal the
the
land
judge.
use appeal of the approval.
Okay,
There's a certain time period for that, but yeah,
Hmm.
it might be changing this resolution again.
well, no, think about it. If we need new members on the commission, one or two of us will temporarily volunteer.
And now that I think about it, though, I'm not sure that this plan will need to go to the historical commission
Because they provided their own historical study.
and because they're not proposing any changes to the buildings.
No, they're not.
No,
I don't-
no, they're not actually. You're right.
Oh, you're so.
So maybe it won't. We'll have to take a look at that.
I'll talk to you
Oh,
tomorrow.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
though,
They're,
'cause at
they're,
this point,
yeah, they're not gonna touch
proposing
the barn, and
changes.
that's the
They're
only. one that-
subdividing, so we'll have to see if subdividing triggers it.
They
but-
could take, someone could take exception to the historical assessment,
McGill.
but it would be without substance because it's only the paper. It's not, nothing is being proposed at this point in time to do anything with it except preserve it, keep it intact is in fact what the report says. So, okay, it just, you
We'll
know, how
figure it
a technicality could change the direction of many things.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments?
Nope.
Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. We're up
Okay.
to the municipal sale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So talking to Mark Miller, we already authorize larger vehicles and things of that nature for municipal bid for sale. What Mark wants to start doing is authorizing or get the board to authorize sale of equipment, smaller equipment on municipal bid as well. So this would be things like he said in the memo, weed whackers, saws, tires, rims, old televising cameras, things of that nature. So it's just another avenue in order to advertise equipment that we no longer need or is amortized out of existence for us.
Okay,
I'll tell you, this is just another example of a invested employee, in this case, the Public Works Director,
Sure.
squeezing every
Every dime.
last cent
Yeah.
out of the existing inventory that's no longer of relevance to their department and just capitalizing on it. I think it's really positive, very positive again for Mark. and-
I'd like to make a motion to authorize Mark Miller to use municipal bid for the sale of equipment throughout the year that needs to be replaced.
I'll second.
all right. Other comments or questions
Thank you, Mark.
No.
from the room, from Zoom? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mark.
Passes.
Thanks, Derek.
Derek,
Yep.
are you up on the
I
stormwater?
I am up again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So actually, the next two, if you remember, yeah, we'll do one at a time, but I just want to let everybody know.
Sorry.
The next two are sort of going to be, you'll see another two.
Sorry. Oh,
That's-
jeez. That's your limit, John. Sorry.
No problem.
Oh, my, God. Poor Derek gets interrupted.
Oh,
I
so
try. I
sorry.
try.
Start
I keep
again.
going.
Derek.
So if you'll recall, we've had these pretty regularly in the past, the stormwater management O&M agreements for certain properties, usually simple stormwater projects. When the previous zoning officer left into the new zoning officer, we kind of, some of them got lost in translation. So we're playing a little bit of catch up. So we'll have two on this one and two on the
Okay.
next agenda. So the first one is a stormwater O&M agreement for 325 Dutton Mill Road. Dwayne did do a little memo there showing exactly what they're doing.
That's a
And it-
lot of new impervious surface.
Attached some information for it. That is correct.
You see that? Over
Yeah.
10,000 square feet of new impervious surface?
Yeah.
It's a new house, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also.
Heck of a new house.
Which is why it's not the simplified approach
Yeah.
like the other one. but yeah.
Chairman, I'd like to move that that we authorize the chair to sign the stormwater management operation and maintenance agreement for the new single family home at 324 Dutton Mill Road.
Second.
All right, any questions from the board, on the floor, from Zoom? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's
And
done.
the second stormwater management O&M agreement is for 1410 Boot Road. This is a little bit smaller of a new pervious surface, constructing in-ground pool and patio at 1410 Boot Road.
Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to authorize the chair to sign the stormwater management operation maintenance agreement for the in-ground pool and patio located at 1410 Boot Road.
Any questions? All from the floor, from Zoom, no. Hearing no questions, I call the question.
Aye.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Standing issues and projects. Quickly.
Sure.
My alarm goes off.
So Hershey's Mill, pretty much done. We are gonna do live stakes soon, I believe. I think we thought we needed to wait till the spring, but we do not have to. Milltown Dam, I have no update at this point. I'm still working with some of the people on the grant side. I'm hoping to have a better update, hopefully a better update at the next meeting.
What's our drop dead date on that?
I mean, there is,
But
as far as,
The grant.
well, getting the grant, and
Well-
keeping the contractor.
well, we haven't gone out to bid yet.
Is this on the Hershey's
This is
Mill?
this is the Milltown.
Oh, this.
Dam.
Or Milltown.
I was just getting that one. So that's, yeah. So
Who-
that is
DCNR.
DCNR.
They're still
Yeah.
reviewing the bid document.
Which one were you thinking of taking legal action?
The DCNR.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to wait to discuss that at a later date, but yeah.
At your leisure, I was.
Yeah,
just
so we
curious.
were, hopefully I have a better update at the next meeting, but
Okay.
it could go a couple different ways. So the next one, last one would be the Hershey's Mill Estates project. We had found out, and Dave might be able to elaborate on this a little bit more, because at MA, I don't know if you were there at last meeting.
Yo, I have a
Oh, you do
liaison
too as well.
report on it.
So I'll be brief then, and Mike can do the liaison report. But essentially, the Commonwealth Financing Authority did not have their scheduled meeting. So the grant that we were counting on is not possible if we want to move in our desired timeframe. And everybody thinks we should really move on it at this point. So I will let others that are more knowledgeable on that subject elaborate further, but that is all I have, Mr. Chairman.
From a financial point of view, we think that it's almost a wash,
It
what
is,
we would have
yeah.
gotten and what we're saving
I was
in
afraid you were gonna
moving
say-
forward right now.
Is there any chance of getting the grant after we do the work?
No.
I talked,
Well-
not really, but I have talked with Jason, who's our resident expert, and he said that there are times that you can go back to him. Once you've signed, like the bid documents, we would sign and everything
Yeah.
and move forward. And then we could go back and say, we had to do this because of an emergency. Is there any way that we could re-allot the funds? And that would
Okay.
just be our request.
Yeah, and,
Okay.
and some of the extenuating circumstances, the reason that they didn't meet in January.
Well,
is they
or
didn't-
they didn't make the decision in November either.
And they didn't make it in November, but in January, they didn't have a quorum.
Ugh.
So,
They meet every 2
and I
months.
suggested to the municipal authority, and they kind of pulled me back of sending a letter to them with our dismay, but when you're looking to somebody for potentially future grant monies, you don't want to offend them, so, you have to kind of, send them
Okay.
tea cakes instead of.
What's the bottom line on money?
Well,
It'll be about 1 million instead of 1,500,000.
Yeah,
Okay, and we have it in the
Oh, yeah.
reserve.
yes,
Well, this will cost us less than we were anticipating.
substantially.
All right,
Yeah.
so should this be on the next agenda?
Well, yeah, because the project's still gonna be ongoing. I mean, if we're, oh, are you
Yeah.
talking about an actual?
Oh, the board doesn't make any decision on this. I mean, municipal authority.
No,
makes it.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping on the first meeting in February that I can have an updated project list
Yeah,
and all the stuff that we had talked about, John, when you stopped by.
we do have a contractor and that was awarded.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
bid was
that's what I
awarded.
thought.
And,
Okay.
and the whole reason for, as Dave explained in the timing of this grant and relative to the lowest bid is that because we initially talked about asking the qualified low bidder for a time extension to wait till maybe we got a decision on the grant. But the contractor was pretty adamant to say, the reason I bid it low was because of the weather that we're working in and the ability to, and they said they were not inclined to give an extension on the
Yeah, the timing thing. yeah.
timing,
It's
so.
actually supposed to start next week, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's ready,
Yeah.
staged,
Yeah.
ready to go.
All right, so technically, we don't have to say go or,
Oh, no, there's no action to be taken by the Board of Supervisors.
although I think we're all agreed that we should do this.
Oh, yeah.
David?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, okay. So please, Mike, as a liaison, will you let them know that the board supports it?
their decision?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
please. I think that's it for us. Public comments, any other matter? Eric, you've been quiet. Thank you. No hands up on Zoom?
Liaison reports.
Thanks, Dave assisted me here, municipal authority meeting of January 9th. First of all, Kevin Cummings has replaced Walter Wuchek as chair for this 2023. Just so you know, general maintenance continue they continue to do good work on a daily basis, checking manhole condition, Hibbard Lane meter was repaired. Continued communication with the Hershey's Mill Estates residents on the project status relative to what we were just speaking of. With Pinoni as our engineer, they've had pre-construction meetings on and controls reviewed for the caustic soda conversion. We have a grant associated with that's been a long process, but we're getting close. We expect in March, the delivery of the UV disinfection system replacement. Bidding and contracting to follow, continued monitoring of the LSA grant awards. Generator number 2 replacement, we did design and coordination with vendors on size and price. And that's the generator number 2 at the Ridley Creek plant. Supplee Valley relining is scheduled for mid 2023. I forget how many feet that is, but that's in the budget. And then, of course, Hershey's Mill Estates, we just talked about going forward there. Big Fish, which oversees the operation of the plant for us. They indicated the plant ran well in December. No odor complaints, particularly and in compliance with the DEP regulations. They updated their 2023 goals and the 2022 accomplishments, and that'll be presented at the Planning Commission, ABC Planning meeting later in the month. They approved formally the 2023 municipal authority budget, and they're continuing to do some work on municipal authority newsletter submission. So they're invested.
Good update. How much money will we have left in the reserve after we pay the $1 million to these folks?
We're gonna be down into the 6-figure number, aren't we? By the
Which
time we get
$1
done?
million for this project?
You may not have that, but once we pay off Westtown pump station and the Hershey's Mill project, I think we're gonna be down into 6-figure digits for our capital reserves.
Yeah, I'm in total with the 5-year capital plan. And this is a good segue because I think we're going to spend about $7 million that is not going to be recouped from our annual contributions to the capital fund and the sewer reserve. So basically taking our balance down we'll take about 40% total. So 2.7 million out of capital, 2.5 million out of capital, 1.3 out of sewer capital reserve, $1 million of grants spent, the rest of the bond, which is almost $2 million, and $500,000 from the infrastructure sustainability. And the rest of the ARPA funds will be spent, and that's by the end of 2024, probably.
But John, were you asking a question specific, how much after the two sewer projects are done will be left in the sewer capital reserve, or was it the general that Dave just provided?
No, I was more concerned about the sewer capital reserve.
About $1 million.
About $1 million.
So almost down to six figures.
With the increased user fees.
Yep.
Will we be building that back up, or will we be just maintaining?
That's the hope. I'm going to be working with the MA to get their input on a more like a 10-year capital plan, asset management, just like we do with the cap reserve fund.
I would have asked you for that next, and you're already there. Good.
But you know, where we are right now with our fees, the build back of the sewer capital reserve fund is not going to be dramatic. So that's part of this long-term plan to say, you know, where do the rates have to go to have a proper fund
Okay.
balance for the contingencies that we talked about, aging infrastructure.
To be
and
continued.
and another Hershey's Mill Estates situation. So
I hear it. Okay.
I have a quick liaison report from the Conservancy. I'm not going to get into all the stuff that they're going to talk about at the meeting on the 31st, but we are going to, they're planning one planting for sure, hopefully a second small planting. And then we're still gonna be going for the Tree City status. So there will be an Arbor Day celebration, proclamation, and a tree planting on that.
Actually, I
date.
just signed the application today.
Oh, good.
And there we go. And Derek has to do the application for that. So, so that's something that's gonna happen. And that's it. That's all I got.
Well, that's good.
Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
Second,
All
let's
in
get out of
favor?
here. Bye.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.